Our next guest speaker was first elected to the Texas House, District 9 in 2012, was reelected to a second term in 2014. Among any other areas during the 86th session, he was named the chairman of the House Energy Resources Committee, many others as well. He is also a radio guy, so please don't hold that against him. But I was interested in learning a bit about his background in that regard. He is chairman of the Texas House Energy Committee. And if you would, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Representative Chris Paddie.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction, Chris, and thank you all for having me here today. And of course, I want to first thank my good friend and your state representative, Ken King. Ken and I came in together, and I've been putting up with him for several years now. Many of you have been putting up with him for a lot longer than that. And so those of you that know him, like I kind of know Ken now, is that, you know, we still need to keep working on him, get him to come out of his shell a little bit and really tell us what he thinks when he has, you know, if you know him, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But in all sincerity, Ken is a great friend and really a go-to guy in a lot of ways in the legislature. We all have our little areas of expertise, if you will. And it was very clear when Ken came into the legislature, when I first met him, that he was supremely focused on protecting rural interests, and particularly as it related to public education. And that's exactly what he's done. He's been instrumental in shaping a lot of the policies the last several years as it relates to that. Very instrumental in landmark public education legislation this session, House Bill 3, that was really an amazing feat, in no small part to Ken King, who was not only on the Education Committee, but was part of the Conference Committee, and really the guy in the back room cutting the deals, and particularly being a fierce advocate for rural Texas. But the real thing I love about Ken is his wife, Robin. I love Robin. I tolerate him. And some of y'all probably agree with me on that as well. But Ken understands how to be effective in the legislature. Those of us that represent rural districts, just as I do in East Texas, we realize and we value and appreciate the concept of building relationships and building coalitions, because we have to. Ken's one vote for 17 counties. I'm one vote for 6 counties in East Texas. On an up and down vote, we lose every time to the urban areas. And so we have to work together, and we have to build coalitions, even though we may not always agree on 100% of the things, but we have to make sure that we stick together and protect our interests. And so I want to make sure I mention that. My name is Chris Paddie, and I've enjoyed getting to meet a lot of you folks, and I've enjoyed my first time to Canadian as well. And I grew up in a town of about 6,000 people. I live in the big city of my district now of about 24,000 people. But I'm an East Texas rural guy. I grew up and I was born and raised there, except for my time at Texas A&M and about 6 years in Houston before thank you, I know you can always count on that. I've seen quite a few Aggie rings around here. Before my wife and I, who was my high school sweetheart, and I moved back to East Texas to raise our family. We have 2 boys, 18 and 15. And I know what you're going to say. He doesn't look old enough to have a kid that's 18 years old, and I appreciate that. But my real job, or the one that helps support this bad habit I have of public service, is I'm in the radio business. We have a cluster of radio stations there in East Texas, of 6 FM, 3 AM stations, and that's where I spend the least amount of my time, it seems, these days. But fortunately, I've got good folks that keep us running and keep us doing well. We're small-town community radio stations, heavily involved in supporting our communities and local news and local sports on any given Friday night. And I know you guys appreciate some good high school football. I've got 15 different play-by-play crews out on any given Friday night calling high school football games. And so that's what pays the bills. I got in the legislature same time King did. After the last redistricting, ran in 2012, and first session was 2013. So we were finishing out our 4th term and seeking, God willing, our 5th term. And I've been blessed to be able to serve in a number of capacities. I do serve as the chair of the House Energy Resources Committee currently, also serving on license and administration, which Representative King also serves on. And I also serve was the vice chair, now the incoming chair of the Sunset Commission, which is the commission that's engaged in reviewing agencies that have to come up for reauthorization and review. And we will have 24 of those coming up this cycle that we'll be reviewing and looking for efficiencies and effectiveness. And some of those include things like the Texas Department of Agriculture, Texas Parks and Wildlife, along with 22 others. And so we'll be engaged in that. Also, and I'm going to save this to the end, but I do want to talk just briefly about redistricting. I do serve on the redistricting committee as well, and so I'm very thankful for that opportunity, although I'll be heading back tonight, this afternoon. I've got hearings starting tomorrow. We have 28 hearings around the state to get input back on the redistricting process before we head into session to draw those maps. And so I'm thankful that I'm on there because, first of all, I have an opportunity to represent rural Texas, and particularly my part of Texas and East Texas, to ensure that we make sure we have a good voice going forward. And I know that's a concern that we have in the Panhandle as well. And so we're busy as it relates to that. Now let's talk a little bit about oil and gas. And I'll be the first to tell you, you've heard some folks this morning that are a heck of a lot smarter than I am and been more engaged in the business. It's not what I do for a living. It's not what any of my family necessarily did for a living. Most of my family down in Shelby County, they either are in the poultry business or timber business or run farms in those areas. And so it wasn't necessarily my background, but I grew up in East Texas. And it's similar to your area of the state, and that natural gas is what we're about as well. In fact, our first radio station, our main radio station in my hometown, the call letters are KGAS, K-gas. And that was intentional because there was a time when we were one of the largest natural gas producers, not only in the state, but in the country. So it's a big thing for us. And so we have some similar challenges that you have with depressed natural gas prices. And although we are seeing a little bit of an uptick in activity in our area, in the Haynesville Shale and over in the Louisiana Bossier area. And so we're thankful for that, and we welcome all as much as they want to do there. So, but I want to talk a little bit about what I see and I've experienced in my capacity as serving 3 terms on the House Energy Committee. I've served as vice chair, and then this, of course, is my first time to be chair of the committee. But it's a very interesting time that we live in. And I know some of what I'm going to share today is related to the Permian Basin, because whether we like it or not, that's where the action is right now, and it is having a not just a statewide impact or a national impact, but it's having a global impact on what's going on right now in oil and gas. And so there's some really interesting things there. I want to touch on a few areas. First of all, just kind of talk about the overall state of the industry, including some interesting statistics. I like numbers. What I kind of see as some of the current and future challenges as we go forward, and then also a little bit about what I believe the legislature's role in terms of policy and oversight, both today and going forward, is. What is our role as legislators and/or regulators in making sure that we do what we need to do, and frankly, in large part, it's stay out of the way. It's reasonable regulations and let the market work and let the oil and gas industry do what it does so well. Obviously, you're in an area, just as I'm from an area that has a great appreciation and understanding, above average understanding of the industry and its impact on our economy and how it affects our communities. We've experienced the ups and downs and the effects that it's had on our communities, but things are a little different now than they have been in the past, and I want to talk a little bit about why. There was a recent, if you read the Dallas Morning News, there was a recent article that was written, and it was really in response to a recent report by the Dallas Fed that was talking about what's going on a couple different levels. And I'll quote, one of the things that it talked about was how, quote, how the fracking revolution has driven a power shift in oil, and while we now live in a world where something close to half of Saudi Arabia's oil production can go offline and not spike gas prices in the United States. Of course, that was a result of the attacks that we're aware of. So we just experienced that, and the amazing thing is, in the past, that would have been hugely disruptive to the market, and we all know that. But it was barely a blip when it happened. And there's really 2 main reasons that I see, and the article talked about why that is. First, production. If you look at 2010 Texas produced less than 1.5 million barrels a day of oil in 2010. Today, it's nearly 5 million barrels a day. So over 3 times as much production of oil today than we had in just 2010. So we're less dependent on those foreign sources that are in many cases not necessarily our friends. They don't have our best interests at heart. They have shown in the past that they are perfectly willing to manipulate the market to do what's beneficial for them and to our detriment in many cases. Well, we're not as dependent on those folks anymore. And no longer does Saudi Arabia and OPEC in general get to drive the bus. We get to have a say in what's going on and how the market reacts to that. And so that is a big thing. The second part, as it relates to the response and why there wasn't this huge swing, is the amount of drilled but uncompleted wells that we have. Again, giving you some numbers, as of July, we had 8,108 drilled but uncompleted wells in the U.S., and 3,999, we'll call it 4,000, of those were in the Permian Basin. Now you back up just a little bit to 2014. Not that long ago, 2014, we had less than 4,000 of those types of wells in the U.S. and fewer than 1,000 in the Permian. Well, doing the math, and I went to A&M, but I can do math a little bit. So that's 2 times as many wells in the U.S. that are drilled but uncompleted, and 4 times as many wells in the Permian that have been drilled but uncompleted. In fact, if you look at the Permian number alone, we basically have as many drilled but uncompleted wells in the Permian today as we had in the whole U.S. in 2014. So what does that mean? Why is that significant? Why does that help with the situation that we're describing here? Well, it's good old supply and demand. We know that prices go up when demand outweighs supply, and any disruption in supply affects pricing. Well, the fact that we have the level of production that we have today, and we have those drilled but uncompleted wells sitting there, provides some stability there, because those wells can be brought online relatively quickly. And so it's almost like having inventory stored in a warehouse. It's sitting there ready to go on kind of a moment's notice if we need to respond. And the industry can be so much more responsive now because of that. And of course, you add in other things like technology and the fact that the industry is just better at it today than they were in the past. We can react to those types of things. And so when something like what happened in Saudi Arabia happens, it doesn't have the same effect on the market that it might have had in times in the past. So it has a calming effect on U.S. oil prices, and we just saw a great example of that with what happened. So it provides that stability. And we haven't always enjoyed that benefit because we haven't had that level of strategic reserves there to be able to answer the call when supplies get called into question. So what's going on in Texas, particularly in the Permian, Delaware Basin, and other, is really a game changer, not only for the state and the country, but really the world. And so it's really exciting times that we're living in. So, I think that's part of the reason why going forward, we have been a part, and I lived in areas where we've been through those booms and busts and things like that as well, and those real more violent swings in pricing and activity. I don't think you're going to see as much of that as far as those huge violent swings because of what I just described. I think that the industry is going to be able to ramp up and down as needed so much easier than they could have had. They can really respond quickly to changing market conditions and be able to handle all of that. And of course, technology and other advancements have really done a lot to that as well. Let's talk a little bit about statistics, because I think some of these numbers are pretty amazing. And of course, everything's bigger in Texas, of course, and we're very proud of that. Texas is the #1 producing state and the #1 producing country. I think most of us know that. We're #1 with about 5 million barrels a day in oil, which is about 40% of U.S. production is Texas. That's pretty big. By the way, we're also a #1 natural gas producer in the U.S. as well. 25.3 billion cubic feet per day, or about 23% of the U.S. production, is right here in the Lone Star State. Oil and gas accounts for about 350,000 jobs in this state with an average salary of $130,000 a year. That's nothing to sneeze at. Texas is home to about 30% of our U.S. refining capacity and growing. as we continue to see more and more investment in the Gulf Coast, particularly with all the export activity as well. Texas is home to 466,623 miles of pipelines. And I want to talk a little bit more about pipelines here in just a minute as it relates to some of our challenges. The oil and gas industry had, if you look at 2017, a $463 billion impact on the Texas economy. Those are big numbers. It directly accounts for around 14% of our Texas gross state product, and if you consider direct and indirect GSP, it's closer to 30%. So although we have diversified greatly over the years in the state, and that is a good thing, oil and gas is still the big dog in so many ways, and it will be for many years to come. In 2018, the industry paid a whopping $14 billion in state and local taxes and royalties. That's $38 million a day that the industry has paid. And we all know that's money that supports our public schools and universities. It helps build and repair roads. It supports our first responders and lots of other great things that we enjoy in our communities. It is a vital part of that. Speaking of education, thanks to the oil and gas industry, we have a permanent school fund with $44 billion. And we have a $29.8 billion permanent university fund. Thank you, oil and gas. We would not have those things without the industry today. In 2018, the industry contributed $1.24 billion in Texas school district property taxes for mineral properties, producing oil and natural gas pipelines and gas utilities. Those are big numbers. It is helping to pay for to educate our most precious resource, and that's our young people. When you consider the district we're in today, and Representative King has 17 counties up this way, some of the numbers that I was able to pull up on that, the industry here in this region, this basin, accounts for over 7,600 jobs. That's big numbers. School tax base of well over $6 billion. Obviously produces a lot of gas, y'all know that, but it also produces over 56 million barrels of oil out of the region as well. Of course, when you look at the gas, it's more like 306 million plus MCF natural gas. And so, like us over in East Texas, we produce a lot of gas. Almost 16,000 producing wells, and approaching 5,000 royalty owners in the area. It is a big part of this community, as you well know. I know I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's critically important to the economic viability of your community, just like it is to mine and frankly to the state and the nation. So there's a lot of positives there. And we talk about positives, and I love to talk about that, particularly before we talk about some of the, not negatives, I'll call them challenges. We have challenges as it relates to the currently and going forward, I think, to make sure that we continue to keep this economic engine going. One of the things that, again, referencing the recent Dallas Fed report, they pointed out some challenges because there are folks out there that are kind of naysayers in a lot of ways. There are a lot of folks that are not very bullish. In fact, they're pretty bearish on the future of oil and gas, and that's because of a number of reasons. I want to mention what they consider to be some of the top ones, but some of it also relates to just the politics of it. It's become so politicized now, and it seems like now it is you have to pick a side. Party-wise or just in general, you got to be, if you're for oil and gas, you're against the environment. If you're for oil and gas, you're against landowners. If you're for oil and gas, you're against, whatever the case may be. It just is not so, and it doesn't have to be that way, and I want to point out a couple things as it relates to that, but we've got some work to do on educating folks. That Fed report pointed out a few things, some of the top issues they felt like were going to be concerns going forward. The ones they pointed out were price, access to capital, and shareholder pressure were some of the top things that they talked about. And those things are important. I get that. But first thing I would point out as well as legislators and largely as operators and people that are in the industry, we can't really control those things a whole lot. But there are some things that are in our control, particularly in the legislature's control, that I think have a huge impact on those very things that they point out as being some of those top challenges and some top concerns. And if we will handle our business and do the right thing, I think folks are going to be more than happy to continue to invest in this industry And so access to capital and shareholder pressure, we talked a little bit about price a while ago, but particularly those two things, I think people are going to be lining up to continue to invest in the future of this industry. What are some of those things that I think that are in our control that we've got to be worried about going forward, that if we don't get right, these will be the very things I think that will be detrimental to the ongoing prosperity and the future of the industry. Workforce development is just one of those. This is one of our greatest challenges we have in this state in general, but for this particular industry and many others, is we have to make sure that we are doing a good job of developing an educated and qualified workforce to fill these positions. We're doing an outstanding job. If you were like me, and there may be some of you as well, I was the first person in my family ever to go to college. My parents, the only message to me was, I don't care what you do, but you're going to college, because no one else in my family had ever had an opportunity to go to college. And so I was going to be the one that made it. And they didn't care what I did, but I was going to go do that. Well, that message was received by a lot of folks. We have more people going to college today than we ever have. Problem is, they're going to college and getting degrees in things that we don't need. And so they're coming out, they got mountains of debt, and they can't find a job much better than they could have found if they just walked right off the stage at their high school and went to work. Meanwhile, I've got industry, and I hear it from it all the time, and probably some of you that are employers in this room are probably saying, I need people, but I can't find people that can do the job and are qualified to do the things I need to do. And that is a problem we have across any number of industries today. Good jobs, good high-paying jobs with benefits that people can make a good living, support their families. And so we've got a bit of a disconnect on the widgets we're producing, if you will, in our higher education system and what the market needs. We've got to be a lot more market-driven as we go forward about making sure that we're producing the type of student and the type of graduate that can go out and take advantage of some of these opportunities. And by the way, that doesn't necessarily mean that my son, who's a senior, has to go off to a great four-year university like Texas A&M and be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. That's great. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. But there are a number of opportunities where success for students, some students, that is not going to be success for them. And we know that. We know that today. We know it when they're in junior high. We know that when they're high school. They're walking the halls today at Canadian high school. They are not going to a four-year university to be one of those things. You know what? That's okay. We should not be discouraging those students in any way, and we should, in fact, be encouraging them to figure out what it is that they want to do, what's success going to be for them. And so I can very easily get on my soapbox on that issue, but I'm not going to do that because I'd be talking to you way too long here. But workforce development is key for economic development in general. I can tell you, businesses aren't going to expand or come to your community if there is not an educated and qualified workforce that can do the work they need to be done. So when people talk to me about economic development, rural economic development, that we focus a lot on in my area, it's all about workforce. Incentives are great. All those things are little icing on the cake type things. But if you can't answer that first question on workforce, you're out of the running. And so we have got to be focused on that. Transportation infrastructure, build and maintain roads, and that's a safety issue as well. The most dangerous part of a person's day, I was speaking to a group the other day, and they were from there in the Permian, and they made the comment, I thought this was really an interesting comment. The most dangerous part of that person working in the oil field in the Permian today is driving from the rig to their house, because folks are dying on a daily basis on these roads. And so we have got to make sure that we are doing what we need to do to invest in transportation infrastructure. Water, both fresh water, but also what we do with produced water. It's one of our biggest challenges, because if you can't do something with that associated water that results from that activity when you're doing those frac jobs, you can't produce. You got to do something with it, whether that's disposal. But I think more and more we're seeing opportunities to look at recycle and reuse, and technology is getting there with some of that. But there is no cookie cutter approach to that as well, because what works in the Anadarko may not work in the Eagle Ford, it may not work in the Permian, it may not work in the Haynesville where I live. And so there is no one-size-fits-all as it relates to that. But those are challenges we have to continue to work on. Infrastructure in general. And by that, I'm talking about pipelines, I'm talking about export facilities, that we're seeing a lot of activity in. Lots have been constructed and more, they're on the way. People are investing billions of dollars in those facilities. Ports, extremely important. All of that I lump into what I'll just call infrastructure in general. If we can't get the product, we heard earlier, and we know it's true, and this is the future, it's going to be about exporting this abundance, this natural resource that the Lord has blessed us with. If we can't get that product to market, we're not in business. And so we have to have that infrastructure in place to be able to do that. And so we have to be able to get our product to market. We have to encourage those investments. And we do that through reasonable regulation, in some case, incentives. But there's a path forward there, and we have to make sure that we are putting forth good policy to encourage that activity and do it in a responsible way. So we absolutely, as a legislature, have a role in those type of things. Now let's talk about the politics of it. I kind of referenced this a little bit earlier. This is one of our greater challenges. We've done a really poor job, and industry in general has done a really poor job over the years of tooting its own horn and really talking about the good things that you do. You show up and you do what you do best. You go to work every day and you do, and you produce and you pay all those taxes and you support your communities. You do all those great things. But right now we have a huge disconnect between the general public, particularly the younger general public, and the oil and gas industry, and a real understanding of what it means to them. They have no idea that 96% of the products, the necessary products that we use in our daily lives, are related in some way to the oil and gas industry. They're even produced with or produced by or with the use of the oil and gas industry. So if you keep it in the ground, what I say, keep it in the ground means all those things can't happen. But people don't get that. We got folks that, again, they are all about, big bad oil and gas industry, and we need to shut them down. They just assume we'll not be doing anything. They have no idea that they no longer get to use that little cell phone or that laptop. And maybe they drive an electric vehicle and they don't put gasoline in it, but it took products of the oil and gas industry to be able to build that car. How about those tires that it's rolling on? All of those things, but there's just a complete disconnect there. We're going to have to do a better job of educating younger folks about that. And that's incumbent on all of us. And those that are in the industry are some the ones that are in the best suited to do that, because you know what you do. And you probably are around and you have a circle of folks that you have influence over that you probably never sit down and say, hey, let me tell you what we're doing. Let me tell you about the good stuff we're doing. You need to do that. People need to understand why it's so important when they use that shampoo, or they put on their eyeglasses, or they get that heart valve replacement, or whatever the case may be, that would not be possible without the oil and gas industry. And most people don't realize that. And so, but it's been politicized even to the point where it's just partisan. It's, Republicans are for oil and gas, and Democrats are against oil and gas, and we love the environment, so we hate oil and gas, and it's really become a bad situation. But we don't have to pick sides. It's not oil and gas versus the environment, or oil and gas against renewables, or any of that stuff. I think it's just false. Fuels are 99% cleaner today than they were in the past. CO2 emissions are at a 20-year low. Methane emissions are down 14% since 1990. You have a group of about 57 companies that are in what's called the Environmental Partnership, and the U.S. oil and natural gas industry is leading in investment in zero and low carbon technology, investing over $100 billion over a 6-year period between 2000 and 2016. That's more than double than any investment made by any other private sector industry. No one is doing more than the oil and gas industry in these areas, but you get very little recognition for that. And frankly, most people don't realize it. So to say oil and gas industry doesn't care about the environment is just wrong. And the efforts that we're doing here in Texas and in the country are having a global impact. And it was kind of referenced a little bit in the first presentation this morning about those exports and what they mean. The expanded use of natural gas with the exports that we're doing are having a tremendous impact on air quality in other parts of the world. China, in just the portions that they've transitioned some of their power generation to natural gas, they've seen a 33% decrease in particulate matter pollution back in the fourth quarter of 2017 from a year earlier. And so what we're doing today, and those products that we'll provide them so they can burn cleaner fuels, is helping a lot of those folks that are way larger polluters than we are here in the U.S., and so it's going to have a global impact when you look at that. And we hear a lot about, in the Permian right now, because that's the hotbed, about, again, getting on the environmental issue, about flaring. We hear a whole lot about that. A lot of folks coming to me and, on the Energy Committee and wanting to bring forth bills about that. They don't really understand what's going on, that's associated gas related to that oil production. It's got to go somewhere. And there's a safety issue on top of that if you're not flaring that stuff off. But these are the same people. They don't want flaring, but they also don't want you to build pipelines. They don't understand that the way we solve that problem, if you're concerned about flaring, you got to allow us to get that product to market. Industry doesn't like the fact that they're essentially burning money. They prefer not to do that. They like to put it in a pipe and put it to market. But we can't do that unless we build pipelines. And so, again, there's that disconnect I'm referencing there. So we have a lot of issues as it relates to pipeline infrastructure and people just not understanding. Industry doesn't oppose, the oil and gas industry doesn't oppose, that's another thing, doesn't oppose renewables and the environment, as I mentioned. They don't oppose those things at all. You probably saw the recent news in the Permian, and a lot of things that are going on as it relates to other alternative options like solar and wind. Of course, you guys have wind up here as well. You know, the Permian's not only a leader in oil and gas right now with the activity they have going on, Permian's still a leader in wind and solar as well. And so it's not that they're against those things, and I personally am not against those things. I'm for an all of the above. In the sense that we stay out of the way, we let the market work. I am opposed to artificially propping up a lot of these other alternatives just for the sake of doing it. I'm not against those other things. If that's what the market wants, let the market work and let the oil and gas compete. And I think most folks are just fine with that. So we have a lot of challenges going forward, but I'm confident that we're going to address those because I have great confidence in the people and a lot of you in this room that are the innovators and have been the innovators for a long time. A lot of things are going on technology-wise and things we're able to do today that, you know, just a few decades ago we never would have dreamed of, or having just a huge impact. And so we have to, from a legislature standpoint, stay out of the way as much as we can, reasonable regulation, good tax policy, maintain necessary incentive programs. Some of them are necessary. Some people are just anti-incentives. I'm not. I think we're needed. I think they're warranted. We got to address our water challenges. We got to encourage infrastructure development. We got to make sure we're producing a world-class workforce if we want to keep this thing going. And I think the future is very bright if we'll do that. And so I thank you what you're doing to lead that effort. I hope you have some questions, but I do want to touch on one thing, oil and gas, not related to oil and gas, because it's critically important to you in this room. It's important to me as a person who represents a rural area as well, and that's redistricting. I want to leave you with this because it is so important. We are losing our representation because the state is growing, but we all know, just like in my area, that they're not moving to where I live, and they're not necessarily moving to where you live. They are moving to the major metropolitan areas, and with that goes the representation. And so, again, Ken is one vote for 17 counties. I'm one vote for 6 counties. Our populations haven't grown, and in some cases, we've had population decreases in some of our counties, and maybe even overall in some of these rural districts. Well, we know right now that because all the districts have to represent roughly the same amount of people, that we're going to need to represent right at about 200,000 people after we draw the lines this next session. That means that 17 counties has to become however many counties if it's going to continue to be viable. It means my 6 counties probably becomes 7 counties. And so that's critical. And every time that happens, we're losing a little more clout. And we're also losing when we have situations where we may lose. We could very well lose a rural district out here in the Panhandle. And we're probably going to lose one in East Texas, where I live as well, where the population are just going to require that there be some combining of some districts, and someone's going to be out. That's one less rural member that is showing up at that Capitol to advocate on behalf of rural interests, which are, in a lot of cases, not necessarily the same interest as those that live in the urban areas. And so we're fighting an uphill battle here that, frankly, in the long term, I'd like to say we can win, but I don't know that we can win, but we need to keep winning as long as we can possibly win, and that's through working together. And so you're going to see a lot of us rural members working very hard. I'm honored to be on the redistricting committee and be on the committee that's has the little crayon to draw some of these maps, and you can bet you I'm going to be looking out for the interests of rural Texas, and of course my district as well. But folks like Ken King in the district that you guys live in and love, we're going to be looking out for your interests as well. And we're going to be fighting like crazy to make sure that you can continue to have good, solid representation. I heard Ken say last night to a group that so you don't have to drive to Amarillo to talk to your state representative, or wherever the case may be, however it shakes out. So we're going to fight very hard for that. But I think that's critically important that, people don't think about that a lot, but redistricting is a really critical deal, not only for the Texas House districts, but Senate districts. And oh, by the way, we also draw the U.S. congressional maps as well. And so, which is interesting because we have grown so much in the state, Texas is actually going to pick up likely three, potentially even 4 new congressional seats. And so not only will we be drawing existing seats, but we'll have to draw the map in such a way to create 3 to 4 new districts. And so that creates some opportunity as well. And coincidentally, I've now noticed, now that I'm on that committee and I'll be, the one helping to draw some of those things, I've got all these new old friends that are congressmen that are calling me up and they just want to catch up. They want to have some lunch or have a coffee or have some dinner, and I don't know what that is or why that is, or maybe I do. And so that's going to be an interesting process. But I can tell you, this is a critical time through this for rural Texas. It is critical. Redistricting is one of the most devastating things potentially for rural Texas. Every time we have got to fight hard for that, and so we're going to have some challenges in certain areas like here and in my area as well, where we're going to have some real challenges to make sure that we hang on to our voice there. I'm going to stop right there because I've talked probably way too much, but if you have some questions, I hope you do. I'm happy to try to answer them. If they're too terribly difficult, I'll probably have Ken answer them, but I'm happy to attempt anyway to answer your questions about any of the stuff I shared on oil and gas or anything else related to the legislature.
Any questions for Representative Paddie?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, it's right after lunch, most people start nodding off a little bit, get a little tired on the downside of this deal.
My question to you is, I live in Pampa, small town, and I work for a real small oil and gas company. And right now, we are doing everything we can to stay alive. And every week, DCP or Energy Transfer or Scout comes out with some new rule or regulation or some other way that they're going to get more money out of our oil and gas than what we're getting. We've gone to the legislature, we haven't got any help there. We've gone to the Railroad Commission, we haven't got any help there. What do we need to do to get some help to fight this? Because back when Texaco and ConocoPhillips and Exxon and all those people were around here, we benefited off of that because they wasn't going to fight those big companies. But now they're all gone and it's all mom and pops. And we're having to fight the gas companies. We bought 2 wells last month. I got my gas statement last week. DCP made $6 more off of that oil and gas lease than what I did on the fees that they're charging, and they don't do anything. There's nothing they have to do. There's a meter sitting there. There's nothing they have to do. I can't even get them to come out and look at the meter because it's been asleep for a week now, and they won't even come and look at it, but yet their fees keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. What can we do as an oil and gas industry up in this area? What can we do to get this taken care of? Yeah. It's a monopoly deal. It's monopolistic is what they're doing.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. We've had, I can remember at least the last couple of sessions I've had conversations about that. We had some discussion, I know, last session in the committee about it, and I know Ken also has brought that issue. And they do. They obviously kind of have you over a barrel. There's not a whole lot you can do there. I think you can continue to do, and I know it doesn't sound like a solution, but all we can do is keep trying. Not only at the legislative standpoint, but the Railroad Commission standpoint too. That it's been taken up, and there's been a lot of discussions, and there's been lawsuits and everything else. We're going to have to make sure that we're communicating with our commissioners as well at the Railroad Commission to make them better understand. I wish I had a silver bullet to tell you, here you go, here's the solution, but I don't have that, and I wouldn't dare tell you I did. But I mean, clearly it is having a tremendous impact on your ability to conduct your business and be profitable and do what you need to do to sustain your business. And so, obviously we need to continue to have that discussion, and surely reasonable folks can come together and find some agreement that works.
We haven't got any reasonable people up there yet. I mean, in all honesty, this is every year it just gets worse and worse and worse, and we can't get anybody to listen to us. Right. What do we need to do to come to you guys to get you to listen to us?
Right. Well, I don't think it's like any other issue. It won't do you any good to come to me because I'm going to agree with you on a lot of it. Just like, and even your own state representative, I think, agrees with you as well. Our challenge is, and this is not unique to your particular situation. This isn't all of it. How do we get enough clout? How do we get enough people together from a coalition standpoint to be enough of a voice to affect change? And I think that's something. Getting back to the whole rural representative thing. A lot of the people that that get to cast a vote, just like Ken and I do in the legislature, don't live in areas like you and I do, and don't have some of these challenges. They have no knowledge of it, don't really care a whole lot about it, and so they don't necessarily side with us on those issues as well. And that's a difficult thing to overcome. I mean, we try and we go to our colleagues and try to make them better understand why certain things are important. But at the end of the day, they don't have a constituency back home which is what they really care about, that's coming to them with that same issue. Like you're coming to me or to Ken or to any other rural representative that's living it. They're not. And in fact, they may, quite the opposite, they may be an urban member that's where a particular company is headquartered or whatever, and they side with, they may side with the other deal. So it's a math issue when it gets down to it. And I know that's not a good answer, but I don't want to say there's nothing we can do or that we shouldn't keep trying. And I assure you, we do and we will continue to do that. But we're fighting an uphill battle.
But this is going to start affecting our schools because these oil
Sure.
companies aren't surviving. I mean, we've had more bankruptcies and people selling out in the last 2 years than we have in the last 70 years. And it's going to affect the schools. It's going to affect the things that you stood up there and talked about.
Right.
So wouldn't it be better to be proactive and do something about it now instead of waiting until everybody leaves and there's a for sale sign on our town?
I absolutely agree with you.
Okay, do something about it. I mean,
I appreciate that, but the fact is, I can't flip a switch and make that happen because we are in the minority as it relates to that type of fight, and we may or may not can win. It doesn't mean I'm perfectly willing to go down to the ship and fight the good fight, but I can't stand up here and guarantee you that it's something that we can actually accomplish. I can't guarantee you that. Doesn't mean I don't want to, and it doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue to try.
There's already a system set up. It's the Railroad Commission, and they're ignoring it. They've ignored us. They ignored the flaring in the Permian Basin. They kicked the can down the road. It's just simply a stop on their way to another political position, and they need to do their job. And they absolutely refuse to. So if you see like Sitton, he's a daggy.
Right.
Tell him to do his job. That's all we want.
All right. Well, I think when some of this issue came up last time, and I don't want to get too much off in commissioner stuff, I think Sitton, I think when some of this has been discussed in recent years, I think Sitton was kind of on your side, if you will, but he was in the minority as it relates to how that came down. But that is one of the places where you can affect change. I mean, those are 3 statewide elected positions that, if folks want to send a message, they could do that. And I'm not suggesting anyone go after a railroad commissioner in any way, but I'm just saying that there are people that need to be hearing from you. And not just you individually, but they need to hear coalitions of folks. They need to be not only folks in the Anadarko, but the Permian and Eagleford and Haynesville, and they need to hear a collective voice of concern and a call to action on some of the things that you care about.
Yes, one moment, please. Let me get a mic to you there. Recording. Do want to remind everyone that all of the sessions will be available on YouTube. If you'd like to go back and view or If you know of others that want to view, but we want to get a mic in front of you so we can pick it up.
How do you feel about forced pooling?
Forced pooling. I'll very nicely say it's come up every session I've been there, and I have not been a fan. I've got concerns. It seems like it's always come up, and we didn't have a hearing on a bill related to forced pooling last session. And frankly, I don't think anyone sent me a bill. It wasn't that I refused to hear it as the chair. I don't think anyone brought it. And so it's continues to come up, and I suspect that we'll continue to have discussions about it. And I welcome you as experts and folks that live and breathe this stuff and see it on the ground every day. Your thoughts on it, on what, if any, changes and/or solutions there might be out there. But in the past, I've had real concerns about forced pooling.
Any other questions?
Man, you guys kind of took it easy on me. I'll come back anytime. Any other questions? And I'll hang around a little while longer, however, until my ride leaves.
So, Mr. Paddie, I want to ask you, you know I'm the county extension agent here, and
Right.
I told you before your presentation how grateful we are for your support of Agrilife Extension. And as you know, Agrilife Extension is about education. And this conference is for that purpose.
Right.
And so these kind of questions, like have been asked, is part of the educational process that maybe we can help as an unbiased party to get out there so that people. So here's really my question. And I don't mean this in an arrogant way, but it's a fact. Agriculturally, and from an energy point of view, the people that live west of I-35 produce the agricultural products and the energy that the people on the east side of I-35 consume. And that's just a fact. You know, up here we produce 26% of the nation's beef supply in the Texas Panhandle. The Permian Basin, you commented, it's like a world entity, you know, it's bigger than Saudi Arabia. So my question to you is how can we work with you and your colleagues like my friend Ken King to convince the people that live in the Golden Triangle how important the west side of I-35 is to them if they want to eat and they want to stay warm. Mm-hmm. So how can we help you guys do that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think Ken mentioned earlier, Ken, how many state reps west of 35? 19 west of 35? That's crazy. And we're ultimately not going to be doing a whole lot better on the east side where I'm at as well. All the representation is right down the corridor. And so that is our greatest challenge, I think, in a lot of ways, not only on the issues you mentioned, but anytime we get into a debate related to transportation funding, to water infrastructure, to public education, to any of those issues, invariably it becomes an argument, not a partisan argument, a Republican-Democrat thing. It becomes an urban-rural thing or a regional issue that we fight over. And the bottom line is that we're losing representation in those very areas. And so our ability to make them, and now we do have the ability, and we've been very blessed. I mean, when you look at on my side of the state and you here as well, you've been blessed to have some members of the legislature that have worked hard and been put into pretty significant positions from a leadership standpoint. And so that brings leverage and it brings clout within the process to be able to kind of horse trade and to be able to communicate better with some of our urban colleagues because they need stuff. And a lot of our members, and Ken's one of those, that are in positions to stop things that they want as well. And so we got to do a little trading a lot of times to be able to do that. But that is becoming increasingly more difficult with every redistricting and as the state continues to grow because we're losing representation. And so we've got to be able to do that, though. And it's incumbent on us as members to go and talk to our colleagues who nothing wrong with you, but might not let, a Dallas representative might not take a meeting with you and really care what you have to say about that. But they'd talk to Ken or I, and they would listen to our sincere concerns about that agriculture issue or that whatever the issue may be. And that's what you send us there to do. And so, that's our job. That's what you hired us to do. Now, we do need your support to do that as well. And not to get too far off in the weeds in politics, that means backing and supporting your representatives when they sometimes have to do some things. They have to make some deals. They have to do some things to protect your interest. And so they need to know that you've got their back home when they're willing to step up and maybe do some things that aren't necessarily popular with everyone, but they're the right thing to do that ultimately lead to success and their ability to be able to represent you. And so, just working with your members, working with Ken and other folks in the Panhandle to make sure that whether you're talking to Ken King or John Smithy or Ford Price or whoever, that they all understand, and I know every one of those guys understand exactly what you're talking about, and so you'd be preaching to the choir, but they're working together, and I know they're working together to protect your interests.
Speaking for myself, but I think I could speak for Agrilife Extension. We want to do what we can do to assist you guys because it's so important to our future as a state.
Well, and what you do is critically important. I want to thank you because I'm a big fan. Obviously, it's a big part of my area as well. I worked on and carried the rider to help secure funding to keep open. We have 2 poultry labs in the state, and one of them's in my district, and that's critically important in my district. And the folks at Agrilife are outstanding and helped us because that's something that I go talk to my Dallas colleagues, and they don't know anything about the business. They don't really care much about why I have a poultry lab in Center, Texas. But through the help and through the partnership with Agrilife, we got the message across, and we made people understand why we needed that money in the budget, why it was important to spend it there as opposed to somewhere else that they might want to spend it. And so we got to work together. Now more than ever, we got to work together.
Representative Paddie, let me do a follow-up on behalf of these pipeline issues. It was a hot topic here at this event last year. I've done a number of interviews on it. I know the PPROA is represented here today. They feel the same thing about it. You got these guys saying that companies like DCP and Energy Transfer are sending down the line, mailing out these take-it-or-leave-it contracts. They can't make any money. They're closing these wells. They're shutting these wells in. We got guys here today that are saying we're not going to be here next year if this continues. So, in your opinion, is it an issue of that's a monopoly? Is that what these people are doing, in your opinion? And should the Railroad Commission step in and intervene?
Well, I mean, clearly, not to rehash the points because you guys can make it a lot better and have made it just a moment ago exactly what the issue is there. We've got to have serious discussions and figure out how we move forward on this, whether it's on that particular issue. Pipelines are a big thing in general right now. Lots of discussions on this particular issue you're talking about, but we have a lot of issues on eminent domain and private property rights and fights that we've had for a number of sessions now, and we will have another one, no doubt, this next session, where we have to figure out. On one hand, we know we got to do business in this state. We know we got to get products to market. We know that is a necessity. We have to have that. But we got to find the proper balance to make sure that we are treating folks fairly, not only from an operator, folks that are in business, but we're treating landowners fairly in the process of how that's handled. And as we make right-of-way acquisitions and/or, as a last resort, have to invoke eminent domain, we need to make sure we've got a good, fair process to do that as well. And so I wouldn't for a second tell you we don't have a lot of work to do as it relates to finding whatever that middle ground is.
So is this particular issue monopoly, or is it free market where these companies are saying, look, it's not profitable enough for us to help you get that product to the market. We can't maintain the pipelines unless we do it this way. Sorry, if you got to shut them in, shut them in. It's business.
Well,
or is it something else?
Yeah, I don't know what the term I would call it. I understand what you're saying, and the fact that just the sheer fact that you don't have another option other than creates obviously the appearance, at the minimum, the appearance of a, if you want your words, a monopoly situation where what's your other option? You don't have another option to get the product to market. And so Again, I'm agreeing with you today that it's an issue that we've got to figure out a solution for.
Thank you.
Picking up on what you said about redistricting, I know there's at least 3 U.S. House of Representatives that are in West Texas that are retiring. Is there someone with their retirements? Is there someone speaking for that redistrict process? You know, I would think that they would have a stake if they were not retiring.
Oh, you mean
Address
like,
that.
since they may not engage because they're on their way out and they don't care as much?
They're lame ducks.
I feel certain that they can exert some influence and they have relationships that they can leverage. At the end of the day, this is a decision of the people. It's a decision of you. It's the very reason why I'm going to be a part of 28 public hearings around the state. I've already done one in Austin, San Antonio. Tomorrow I'll be in Fort Worth. The next day I'll be in Dallas holding hearings. The following week I'll be in Houston for 2 days doing hearings. And then I'll be heading to Corpus Christi and down in Rockport. And I'll be down in the Valley. I'll be in El Paso. We're going to have some hearings up in this area in the Panhandle as well. So yeah, and if you go online to the state site, to the House site, and go to the redistricting website, it'll have a list of all those dates. Those dates have already been defined, and we will have those hearings largely late afternoon into the evening because we want to make sure folks can come. We don't want to limit folks that may have to be at work to come up and first educate themselves, but also to make sure their voices are heard in the process. And so at the end of the day, we need you as the constituency of this reason. That when there's an opportunity up in this area, and there will be, whether it's in Amarillo or and I can't remember other places. I think we'll be in Lubbock and some other places. But when we have them up here, show up, yeah, and tell others to show up, and make sure that my colleagues, many of them that don't represent rural areas, that they fully understand the significance of what we could do and how that would detrimentally affect your region and the livelihood of folks in these communities. And so we need your help with that, more and more from the rural areas.
Any other questions for Representative Paddie? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you guys very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir.